Uh, uh. Good morning. Good morning.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Morning Deuce. Happy Tuesday. It's voting day if you're in California, so that's what I'll be doing with my morning. This is the most interesting primary, for sure, an election I'll have ever voted into because for the last 10 months, maybe longer, I have dedicated a lot of time to following it because it's what I do professionally for a media outlet. But believe it or not, I'm not the most political person in the world, which I think has made it easier for me to follow because I'm producing and working with a team, and I think it makes me a little bit more pragmatic and a little bit more reasonable and sort of able to look at the strategy and to look at the process and not just the emotion of candidates or protesters or whatever, speeches, debates, sort of just looking at the picture as a whole, seeing the numbers change, seeing the candidacy change, seeing the support for different people change, and the process. And I've learned a lot in this election season, but I've definitely learned that elections will never, ever be the same. They'll never be the same because now things no longer go from the TV to the internet. They go from the internet to the TV. Every candidate is managing their message through their social media networks and through their chain of events. And that's just different than it used to be. It used to be filtered through reporters who would sit on buses and follow these candidates all over the place. And now we play raw speeches of them on national news constantly because it gets the most viewership. And then whatever their phrases are that they say, for people that aren't watching, they just get tweeted out and sort of echoed through Twitter over and over and over again. And that's part of the process, and that's sort of something that I've grown to love and to hate. I mean, it's amazing to share instantaneously all this information. It's so easy to learn more about these candidates than, you would ever know about John Kerry and George Bush running the first time, George W. Bush, or I guess regular George Bush, H-Dub, because the information spread is so quick and so rapid. But it's terrible because it is flooding. So if one person says one thing that gets moved or taken out of context or repeated, then it just gets repeated like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. But smart candidates and smart campaign teams can use it for their advantage. And we saw an example of that last night, actually. So it's the night before 5 states vote in Democratic primaries or caucuses, and 6 states vote overall. One just has a Republican primary, but obviously it's uncontested now. So Donald Trump will be winning all of those events. But the Democratic events are still very much contested. But using that sort of echo chamber, if you will, of one thing being said and repeated over and over and over again, talking about using it correctly, the Clinton campaign did something really smart last night, the night before these voting for these primaries. Basically, their best chance to have a great performance against the Sanders campaign is to have a low voter turnout, particularly in California and also in New Jersey. All of the predicting outlets have said that the lower turnout possible, the better that is for the Clinton campaign. Sanders himself has said if the turnout is high, he thinks he'll win. If the turnout is historically high, he thinks he'll win significantly. But if it's low, his campaign won't be successful in those states. So what they have decided to do, what the Clinton campaign did that was really intelligent, was they tried to figure out a way, okay, how do we maybe keep voter turnout low? Because, we've already incentivized our voters, and Hillary Clinton has very intense supporters and very intense detractors. She's ultra polarizing. And actually, the disapproval ratings between her and Trump are some of the highest there is, which means both candidates of those two at least, are ultra polarizing. You either really like them or you really don't. There are very few people that are indifferent about Hillary Clinton or indifferent about Donald Trump. So what the Clinton campaign did as a measure, they intelligently used that echo chamber to basically, they waited until the night before the Tuesday primary to release information that another superdelegate had given verbal confirmation that she was supporting Hillary Clinton, which would, with regular delegates and superdelegates, give her the total number necessary to be the uncontested nominee of the party. And they released that information the night before. Basically, we have all the votes necessary. We're going to win the Democratic nomination no matter what. Well, what does that do if you're on the fence? You have things going on the next morning and you were going to vote for or against Hillary Clinton, or you weren't sure how you were going to vote. You might say, I was going to vote for Sanders, but now it seems like a lost cause. Or like, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. It seems like a lost cause. Or, maybe even I was going to vote for Hillary if it's a lost cause. It's worth the sacrifice to her to keep the low voter turnout down. But the thing is, superdelegates are a very interesting breed of delegate, if you will. 15% of the Democratic Party delegate votes are superdelegates, which are completely unbound delegates. There's hundreds and hundreds of them, and they can wait until they don't have to declare firmly until the convention. So the party says basically you shouldn't count those endorsements as delegates for your campaign. You should only count the ones that are forced by the vote within your state. So that would be the other 85% of the delegates for the Democratic Party in this instance. Well, the Clinton campaign decided, that might be what we're supposed to do, but the smartest thing for us to do is to release this the night before. Anyone who wakes up in the morning or the night before, they might see the statement released. We are so excited to announce we have reached the magic number of delegates necessary and solidified the status that we and Hillary Clinton will be the Democratic nominee for president. Is that true? Maybe. But can all of those superdelegates change their minds between now and July 25th? Yes. Did hundreds of the, several hundred, more than half a thousand, I think it's 600 or 700, make up their mind to support Hillary Clinton more than 9 months ago? Yes. Could those people be changing their mind? Yes. But to the Clinton campaign, if they just make that statement, it will go through this echo chamber of everyone else on the internet who covers politics, who wants to be first. Clinton campaign says they reached the magic number. Clinton campaign says they reached the magic number, until it's just, I reached the magic number - Hillary Clinton, and then it's Clinton reaches the magic number. Well, that recycles through the internet, through the talk shows, through television, and through Facebook and all the other forms of instant media, to the point that everyone kind of assumes that 140 character tweet or less is 100% the truth. And that's brilliantly done because that keeps the voting number lower. However, it's not the truth exactly. And the Sanders campaign came out with a statement that they released, and unfortunately for them, they are playing catch-up, which is the sign of that's a negative. That's a bad thing. And even though they've put out tons of press releases saying there's no way that either candidate, without superdelegates who cannot be accounted for until the convention, can get the number of delegates necessary to assure themselves the Democratic candidacy, they haven't made that message quite loud enough, whereas the Clinton message seemed to resonate very, very loud. So their PR spokesperson released a message that said, It's unfortunate that the media, in a rush to judgment, is ignoring the Democratic National Committee's statement that it is wrong to count the votes of superdelegates before they actually vote, which cannot happen until the convention this summer. Secretary Clinton does not and will not have the required number of pledged delegates to secure the nomination. She will be dependent on superdelegates who do not have to vote until July 25th and can change their votes. That includes more than 400 superdelegates who endorsed Secretary Clinton 10 months before the first caucuses and primary votes were cast and long before any other candidate was announced in the race. Our campaign is focused from now until the convention on trying to convince those superdelegates to change their vote and that Bernie Sanders is the strongest candidate against Donald Trump. Well, that's PR spin zone to try to catch up to get your voter turnout high. But you don't want to be reacting. You want to be acting. And so the smart campaigns are trying to get that echo chamber started at the perfect time. It's not a coincidence that the last magic superdelegate made a verbal endorsement the night before this critical last Super Tuesday primary. It's a calculated strategy. Just like when someone markets something to you, just like marketing to kids has bright colors and fun images, just like talk shows and commercials and all that stuff is brilliantly psychologically marketed, so are things like this. How you use the echo chamber, how you use the eyeballs is very, very important. And the Trump campaign is doing a great job with it. They've realized that it doesn't matter necessarily what you say, as long as what you're saying is so unbelievable that people have to see it. They need to see it. Because if you're unpredictable, if you're loud, if you're, vivacious, for lack of a better term, people tune in. If they want to hate what you want to say or they want to like what you want to say, they tune in. And when you tune in, that means eyeballs, which means dollars for media stations. So they continue to cover you. And the more exposure you get, the better off, the more likely people are to start to sympathize, relate, enjoy, respect you or your candidacy or your product or whatever. It's the same thing with music. Statistically speaking, if you like a song and you hear it enough times, even if you started hating it, your brain actually starts to like the song because it recognizes the patterns. The patterns are predictable. And then it's less work for your brain, and it's easier. It likes it. So even the songs that you think you might hate, the more you listen to, you kind of soften up to them. Well, it's the same with politicians. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, they're all repeating phrases, perfectly calculated, to try to make it easier for your brain to digest, to hammer it home, to say, oh, I like this because this phrase continues to create this solidifying image in my head, and that's the image that's easiest for my brain to process. And that's the brilliance of it all. It's about getting eyeballs, repeating a message, and expanding your brand. Or trying to use this sort of echo chamber of constant repeating where everyone's a journalist, where everyone's spreading information on Facebook, reposting articles, constantly spreading that information as quickly as possible the way that you want to, whether it's right, correct, ethical, or not. And that is the craziness of the 2016 campaign. It requires everyone to kind of be an investigative journalist and challenge every fact, every video, every mashup of clips of this, every statement of this and this. This person's a racist. Well, are they a racist or are they not? Like, do we know that? Do we not know that? What are their actual thoughts behind these policies? This person believes in this. This person did this. Well, do we know that or do we not know that? Am I getting that from a reputable source? Because the thing is now, with everything going from the internet to television, and I know this because I work for a national station, CNN isn't the first reporter. Fox isn't the first reporter. Fox is reporting on what someone else is reporting on what someone else is reporting on that they heard from someone else who talked to someone in the campaign. It is so many levels removed now that you can't even trust the biggest names in the industry because they're just trying to keep up with the independent, smaller citizen journalist process that's going through right now. So it is up to the voter to be informed, which is difficult but easier. Difficult in that it requires effort, but easier in that we can all do it. We don't have to we can all do the research the way that we want to using the internet. So the 2016 elections, the process has been very, very enlightening. And I'm excited to cast my ballot today to be part of the process, to be the most informed voter I have been probably ever, and maybe the most informed voter I will ever be, at least for one election process. I've certainly learned a lot covering it, and that's sort of where my head is at today. So that's the end of part one. And for part two, we're going to wipe it clean. Part two, I'm going to talk a tiny bit about bucket list items. I have been thinking more and more about what I really want to do with my time and my energy. And, energy is like any other thing. You only have a limited amount of it. And you got to, sleep, regenerate it, however that makes sense. So if you're running, you can only run for so long before your muscles give out. You can only do something for so long before it gets harder. You're not doing it any better. Well, energy is the same way. You can only give so much energy to something, and when you give it to something, you can't give it to something else. It's like time. It's an asset that goes away. Well, there's some things I want to do, and I had a couple interesting ideas that are trying to sneak onto my bucket list, which I will come up with and eventually will read aloud for one of these podcasts. One of them, I have a great friend, Claire. Shout out to her if she's listening. She's awesome. She works for Google. She's the best, and hopefully she'll be a guest on this podcast pretty soon. But in high school, I believe she had a bucket list. I think it was high school, and one of her goals was to get a standing ovation from a room full of people, which I think is a great goal because it means you've achieved something and other people are impressed with your achievement and sort of respect what you're trying to do. And if that's the level of quality that you're searching for, and the level of impact that you're trying to do with whatever you're making, creating, or sharing, then that's really a nice bar to set. Like, okay, if I can earn a standing ovation from these people, then I've moved them, I've motivated, I've done something to a high level that was worth doing. I think that's a really cool one. That's getting on my bucket list. An interesting one that just sort of came up the other day as we were talking about in the news industry, you write an obituary for someone before they die. So when you find Muhammad Ali is dying or in the process of dying, you start writing the obituary. The New York Times has hundreds and hundreds of obituaries already written. President Obama's obituary is already written. Hopefully it won't have to be used for some very, very long time, but it is written. Well, it would be pretty amazing life if you lived a life that your obituary could be written by someone who doesn't even know you. I mean, that is impactful because normally an obituary is written, by friends or family or whatever, submitted online or in a newspaper. And it's not to say your life doesn't have an incredible value if it's not written by someone you don't know. Like if it's written by someone you do know, that's fine. But that would be quite a goal to strive for because you look at someone like Muhammad Ali, who's obviously an insane athlete, probably the most well-liked and most recognized athlete of all time across the world, probably the most recognized athlete of all time. He had his obituary by hundreds and hundreds, written by hundreds of people who don't know him, which is means you lived an impactful life. So those two things, if you're getting enough standing ovations, then you might be able to get into that very rarefied air of warranting an obituary written by someone who doesn't even know you. So, reach for the stars, I guess. What items are on your bucket list, and what can you do that gets you a standing ovation from a room full of people? That's how we're going to end our Tuesday. Get at it. Make a difference. That's it. Morning Deuce. We're out. #trending.com. #tell your hot friends. Deuces.